Welcome to another story on Cheating Tales Lab. We're so happy to have you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. Laura's fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as she pulled into the parking lot of Le Petit Bistro. Her heart raced, a mix of excitement and guilt coursing through her veins. She glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting a stray lock of hair and reapplying her lipstick. The restaurant was far enough from her suburban life that she felt safe. No one she knew would stumble upon her here, sharing an intimate lunch with Josh, her co-worker turned lover. As she stepped out of the car, she pushed thoughts of Mark and Jacob to the back of her mind. This was her time, her escape. Josh was already seated at a corner table when Laura walked in. His eyes lit up as he saw her, a smile spreading across his face. He stood to greet her, pulling out her chair. "You look beautiful," he murmured, his hand lingering on her back as she sat down. Laura felt a flutter in her stomach. "Thank you. You're not so bad yourself." They ordered quickly, both eager to maximize their time together. As they waited for their food, Josh reached across the table, taking Laura's hand in his. "I've been thinking about you all morning," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Laura leaned in, lowering her voice. "Oh, and what exactly were you thinking about?" Josh's grin turned mischievous. "Well, for starters." His words were cut short as Laura's eyes suddenly widened in horror. Across the restaurant, she spotted a familiar face. Jacob, her teenage son, was sitting with a group of his friends, laughing and joking around. As if in slow motion, Jacob's gaze swept across the room, landing squarely on his mother and the man holding her hand. Panic gripped Laura's chest. She yanked her hand away from Josh, nearly knocking over a water glass in the process. "I have to go," she stammered, grabbing her purse and standing up abruptly. Josh looked bewildered. "Laura, what's wrong?" But she was already moving, her heels clicking rapidly across the restaurant floor. She reached Jacob's table just as he was starting to stand, his expression a mix of confusion and dawning realization. "Jacob," Laura hissed, grabbing his arm. "We need to talk. Now." Without waiting for a response, she dragged him towards the entrance, ignoring the curious stares of his friends. Once outside, she pulled him around the corner of the building, out of sight of the restaurant windows. Jacob yanked his arm free, his face hardening. "What the hell, Mom? Who was that guy?" Laura's mind raced, searching for an explanation, an excuse, anything. But as she looked into her son's eyes, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Understanding, disappointment, disgust. "Jacob, please," she began, her voice trembling. "You can't tell your father about this. It's not what you think." Jacob scoffed, crossing his arms. "Really? Because it looks like you're cheating on Dad." Laura felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She reached out to touch Jacob's arm, but he flinched away. "Sweetie, please. I know this looks bad, but you have to understand. Your father and I, things haven't been good for a long time. Josh, he makes me feel alive again." Jacob's expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew colder. "So you're just going to throw away our family? For what? Some guy who buys you fancy lunches." Desperation clawed at Laura's throat. She had to make him understand, had to keep him quiet. Without thinking, words tumbled from her mouth, words she never thought she'd say to her own child. "If you don't tell your dad, I swear, I'll leave him for someone who'll make us rich. You could have a new dad who gives you everything." The moment the words left her lips, Laura wanted to take them back. She watched as shock, then hurt. Then a cold fury washed over Jacob's face. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. Laura stood there, rooted to the spot, watching her sons retreating back. She felt hollow, sick with the realization of what she'd just done. How had it come to this? How had she become this person? After what felt like an eternity, Laura forced herself to move. She had to get back to Josh, how to salvage what was left of this disaster of an afternoon. But as she walked back into the restaurant, she felt a pit forming in her stomach, a sense of dread that told her nothing would ever be the same again. Josh looked up as she approached the table, concern etched on his face. "Laura, what happened? Are you okay?" She plastered on a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Everything's fine. Just ran into someone I know. It's all taken care of." As she sat down, picking up her fork with trembling hands, Laura tried to focus on Josh, on the meal, on anything but the look in Jacob's eyes as he walked away. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just set something terrible in motion, something she might never be able to undo. The rest of the lunch passed in a blur. Laura nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals. But her mind was elsewhere. She kept replaying the confrontation with Jacob, wondering if there was something else she could have said, something that would have made a difference. As they left the restaurant, Josh pulled her close, whispering in her ear, "I've got a surprise for you. My place tonight." Laura hesitated. The thought of going home, of facing Jacob and Mark, made her stomach churn. Maybe one more night of escape wouldn't hurt. One more night before she had to deal with the consequences of her actions. "Okay," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll be there." As she drove to Josh's apartment that evening, Laura's phone buzzed with texts from Mark. Where was she? Was she working late again? She ignored them, guilt gnawing at her insides. Just one more night, she told herself. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to fix this mess. But as Laura lay in Josh's arms that night, sleep eluding her, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late, that the life she'd known was slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to hold on to it. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, matching Laura's mood as she drove home. She'd left Josh's apartment early, wanting to get home before Mark left for work. She needed to talk to Jacob, to try and smooth things over before he had a chance to tell his father what he'd seen. As she pulled into the driveway, Laura took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. But when she tried to unlock the front door, her key wouldn't turn. Frowning, she tried again, then again. Nothing. Panic rising in her throat, Laura banged on the door. "Mark, Jacob, is anyone home?" She heard footsteps approaching, then the sound of the lock turning. The door opened, revealing Jacob. His face was eerily calm, a stark contrast to Laura's frantic energy. "Jacob, thank God," Laura said, relief washing over her. "What's going on with the lock?" But as she tried to step inside, Jacob blocked her path. In his hand, he held a stack of papers. With a sinking feeling, Laura realized what they were. "I don't want a rich dad," Jacob said, his voice cold and flat. "I love my real dad." Laura stumbled backward, the world spinning around her. This couldn't be happening. It was too soon, too fast. How had Mark found out so quickly? As if reading her thoughts, Jacob continued, "I told Dad everything as soon as I got home yesterday. He didn't yell or cry. He just got to work." Laura's eyes fixed on the divorce papers in Jacob's hand. Her son, her baby boy, was serving her with divorce papers. The betrayal cut deep, leaving her breathless. "Jacob, please," she begged. "We can talk about this. We can fix this." But Jacob's expression remained impassive. He motioned to a small, elegantly wrapped box in his other hand. "Dad's already agreed. He says this is for your lover." With shaking hands, Laura took the box. It was heavier than she expected, the wrapping paper smooth and expensive under her fingers. She tore it open, her heart pounding in her ears. As the contents of the box were revealed, Laura's eyes widened in horror. A scream tore from her throat as she collapsed to the ground, the box tumbling from her grasp. Inside was a framed photograph. Josh, smiling and happy, surrounded by a beautiful woman and 2 young children. His family, the family Laura hadn't known existed. As Laura lay crumpled in the doorway, crying and screaming, she was vaguely aware of movement inside the house. Through her tears, She saw Mark sitting calmly at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hand. His face showed no emotion as he watched her fall apart. "Come inside, Jacob," Mark said, his voice steady. "Close the door." Jacob hesitated for a moment, looking down at his mother. For a brief instant, Laura thought she saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the same cold determination she'd seen in Mark's face. The door closed with a final sounding click, leaving Laura alone on the porch. She curled into herself, sobs racking her body. How had it all gone so wrong? So quickly? Inside, Mark took a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving the closed door. "Sit down, son," he said to Jacob. "We need to talk." Jacob slid into the chair across from his father, his shoulders tense. Is Mom going to be okay?" Mark's expression softened slightly as he looked at his son. "She made her choices, Jacob. Now she has to live with the consequences." "But, Dad, I never thought. I mean, when I told you, I didn't expect." Mark held up a hand, silencing Jacob's stammering. "You did the right thing, telling me. I'm proud of you for that. But what happens next, that's on me. You understand?" Jacob nodded slowly, a mixture of relief and uncertainty on his face. Mark leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Your mother betrayed us, Jacob. She was willing to throw away everything we've built, everything we are, for a man she barely knows. A married man at that." He gestured towards the door, where Laura's sobs could still be heard. "That box. That was just the beginning. She needs to understand exactly what she's lost." "What are you going to do?" Jacob asked, a hint of fear creeping into his voice. Mark's smile was cold, calculating. "Don't worry about that. I've got it all planned out. By the time I'm done, she'll wish she'd never even looked at another man." As Jacob listened to his father lay out his plans for revenge, he felt a chill run down his spine. He'd wanted his mother to face consequences for her actions, yes. But this seemed like something else entirely. Outside, Laura's cries had quieted to soft whimpers. She pulled herself to her feet, using the porch railing for support. Through the window, she could see Mark and Jacob deep in conversation. The sight of them, united against her, sent a fresh wave of pain through her chest. She stumbled to her car, fumbling with the keys. She had to get away, had to think, but as she started the engine, Laura realized she had nowhere to go. No family that would take her in, no friends who would understand. There was only Josh, and even he. The image of the photograph flashed in her mind, and Laura felt bile rise in her throat. She'd ruined everything, destroyed her family, for a man who'd been lying to her from the start. As she drove away from the only home she'd known for the past decade, Laura felt a sense of finality settling over her. This wasn't just the end of her marriage, or her relationship with Josh. It was the end of everything she'd thought her life was. And as the house disappeared in her rearview mirror, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of her nightmare. Inside the house, Mark watched Laura's car pull away. He turned to Jacob, his expression grim but determined. "Remember this moment, son," he said. "This is where we start rebuilding. Just you and me." Jacob nodded, a mixture of emotions swirling in his chest. Anger at his mother, fear of what was to come, and a fierce loyalty to his father that surprised even him. As they began to discuss the practical matters of their new reality, changing locks, canceling credit cards, contacting lawyers, neither of them noticed the small, wrapped box still lying on the porch. A final, cruel reminder of the secrets and lies that had torn their family apart. The sun set on a house divided, a family shattered. But for Mark and Jacob, it was also the dawn of something new, a bond forged in betrayal, tempered by shared pain and strengthened by a mutual desire for justice. Or was it revenge? Only time would tell. Josh stared at his phone, his heart pounding in his chest. The caller ID showed his wife's name, and he knew he should answer. But fear paralyzed him, his thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, He swiped to accept the call. "Hello?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The sound of sobbing came through the speaker, making his blood run cold. "How could you?" his wife choked out between sobs. "How could you do this to us?" Josh's mind raced, trying to make sense of her words. "Honey, what are you talking about? What's wrong?" "Don't play dumb with me," she screamed, her voice raw with pain and anger. "I got the pictures, Josh. I saw everything. You and that woman. How long has this been going on?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Josh realized what had happened. Someone had sent his wife photos of him and Laura. Their secret was out, and his carefully constructed life was crumbling around him. "Listen, I can explain," he started, but his wife cut him off. "Save it. I'm taking the kids and leaving. Don't bother coming home. We won't be there." The line went dead, leaving Josh standing in the middle of his office, the phone still pressed to his ear. He felt like he was going to be sick. How had this happened? Who had sent the photos? As the reality of the situation sank in, panic began to set in. He had to talk to Laura. She must know something about this. With shaking hands, he dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Damn it," he cursed, slamming his fist on his desk. He had to find her, had to figure out what was going on. Josh stormed out of his office, ignoring the curious glances from his co-workers. He made his way to the reception area where Laura worked, his eyes scanning the room frantically. There she was, sitting at her desk, looking pale and distracted. As if sensing his presence, she looked up, her eyes widening in fear as she saw the expression on his face. Without a word, Josh grabbed her arm, pulling her roughly to her feet. "We need to talk," he hissed, dragging her towards an empty exam room. Once inside, he slammed the door shut, rounding on Laura with fury in his eyes. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded. Laura stumbled back, her back hitting the wall. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," Josh shouted, echoing his wife's words from earlier. "Someone sent my wife photos of us. She's leaving me, taking the kids. My life is ruined." Comprehension dawned on Laura's face, followed quickly by horror. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Josh, I swear I didn't do this. I would never." "Then who did?" Josh pressed, his voice low and dangerous. "Who else knew about us?" Laura's mind raced, thinking back to that fateful day at the restaurant. "My son," she said, her voice barely audible. "Jacob saw us together, but he couldn't have." Josh's laugh was bitter and cold. "Well, someone did, and now we're both screwed." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Both Laura and Josh froze, staring at each other in panic. The door opened, revealing Dr. Simmons, the head of the clinic. "Josh, Laura," he said, his voice grave. "My office. Now." The walk to Dr. Simmons' office felt like a march to the gallows. As they entered, they saw two other members of the clinic's management team already seated. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Dr. Simmons took his seat behind the desk, fixing Josh and Laura with a stern gaze. "I'm sure you both know why you're here," he began. "We've received some disturbing information about the nature of your relationship." Josh opened his mouth to speak, but Dr. Simmons held up a hand, silencing him. "Before you say anything, I want you to understand the gravity of this situation. Your behavior has not only violated our workplace policies, but has also put the reputation of this clinic at risk." He turned to Josh first. "Josh, given the nature of these allegations and the evidence provided, we have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Josh's face drained of color. "You can't do that," he protested weakly. "I've been here for years. I have rights." "You should have thought of that before engaging in an illicit affair with a coworker." Dr. Simmons cut him off coldly. "Security will escort you to clear out your office." As Josh was led away, Dr. Simmons turned his attention to Laura. "As for you, Laura, you're being placed on unpaid leave pending a full investigation. We'll be in touch regarding the outcome." Laura nodded numbly, unable to form words. As she left the office, she could feel the eyes of her co-workers on her, hear the whispers following in her wake. The shame and humiliation were overwhelming. Outside the clinic, Josh was waiting for her, his face a mask of fury and desperation. "This is all your fault," he spat. "If you hadn't been so careless." "My fault," Laura shot back, her own anger rising. "You're the one who lied about being married. You ruined my life." They stood there, glaring at each other. The passion that had once drawn them together now twisted into something ugly and bitter. In that moment, Laura saw Josh for what he truly was. Not an escape or a dream of a better life, but a coward who had been using her all along. "Stay away from me," she said, her voice cold. "We're done." As Laura walked away, leaving Josh standing alone in the parking lot, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the lies were finally over, despair at the wreckage of her life, and a creeping dread as she realized that this was only the beginning of her troubles. Little did she know, across town, Mark was just getting started with his plan for revenge. Mark sat in his lawyer's office, a smile on his face as he listened to the details of the divorce proceedings. The lawyer, a shark in an expensive suit named Richard Hartley, was outlining their strategy. "We've moved quickly, which gives us a significant advantage," Hartley explained. "With the evidence of her infidelity and the impact on your son, we're pushing for full custody of Jacob and a division of assets heavily in your favor." Mark nodded, his eyes cold. "And the house? The bank accounts?" Hartley's smile was predatory. "As of this morning, Mrs. Buford's access to all joint accounts has been terminated. We've filed for exclusive use of the marital home, citing her affair and abandonment. She'll be locked out literally and figuratively." "Good," Mark said, leaning back in his chair. "What's our next move?" Hartley pulled out another file. "We need to focus on building a narrative, not just for the court, but for your community. The more isolated we can make Laura, the better our position becomes." Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "Small towns run on gossip, Mr. Buford. We just need to nudge things in the right direction." As Mark left the lawyer's office, he felt a sense of satisfaction. Laura had betrayed him, had been willing to throw away their family for a fling. Now she would learn the consequences of her actions. Over the next few weeks, Mark put his plan into motion. He started with subtle comments to neighbors, expressions of concern about Laura's erratic behavior and neglect of her family duties. He reached out to mutual friends, sharing carefully selected details of her affair, always with an air of reluctant disclosure. At the country club, he made sure to be seen as a devoted single father, bringing Jacob along and engaging in heartfelt conversations about the challenges of raising a teenager alone. The sympathetic looks and supportive comments from other members told him his strategy was working. Laura, meanwhile, was watching her world crumble around her. Friends stopped returning her calls. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid talking to her. Even her own family, when she reached out in desperation, was cold and distant. "How could you do this to Mark?" her sister had asked, disgust evident in her voice. "He's such a good man. And poor Jacob. You should be ashamed of yourself." The final nail in the coffin of Laura's reputation came on a warm Saturday evening. Mark had organized a casual dinner at Le Petit Bistro, the very restaurant where Jacob had caught Laura with Josh. He had invited several influential members of the community, including the head of the PDA, the chief of police, and, in a particularly cruel twist, Josh's estranged wife. As they sat around the table, enjoying their meals, Mark held court. With charm and just the right touch of vulnerability, he shared the story of Laura's betrayal. "I just never saw it coming," he said, shaking his head sadly. "All those late nights at the office. I thought she was working hard for our family. Turns out she was working hard on something else entirely." The group murmured sympathetically, shooting glares at Josh's wife, who sat rigid in her chair, her face a mask of pain and anger. "The worst part," Mark continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is what it's done to Jacob. He's so angry, so hurt. He caught them together, his own mother with another man. Can you imagine? The gasps and looks of horror around the table told Mark that his words were having the desired effect. He was just about to launch into another carefully crafted anecdote when a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. Josh stumbled into the restaurant, clearly drunk. His clothes were disheveled, his eyes wild as they scanned the room. When he spotted his wife, he lurched towards their table. "Baby, please," he slurred, reaching for her. "You gotta listen to me. It was a mistake. I love you." Josh's wife recoiled, her face a mixture of disgust and pity. "Get away from me, Josh. You're making a scene." But Josh was beyond reason. He grabbed at her arm, his voice rising. "You can't leave me. I'll die without you." Mark watched the scene unfold with a sense of satisfaction. He hadn't planned this, but it was working out perfectly. As the restaurant security guards appeared, grabbing Josh and starting to drag him away, Mark stood up. "I'm so sorry about this," he said to the group, his voice filled with false concern. "Josh has been having a hard time since, well, maybe we should call someone for him." But his words were drowned out by Josh's increasingly desperate shouts. "It's not fair," he yelled as he was pulled towards the door. "Why does he get to keep everything while I lose it all? It's not fair." As Josh was finally removed from the restaurant, Mark turned back to the table. The looks of sympathy he received were tinged now with something else, respect, admiration even, for how he was handling this difficult situation. Mark allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Laura's reputation was in tatters, her support system destroyed. Now it was time to move on to Phase 2. Little did he know, Laura and Josh were about to make one last, desperate attempt to fight back. Laura paced back and forth in the dingy motel room, her mind racing. How had it come to this? Just weeks ago, she had a home, a family, a respectable job. Now she was homeless, jobless, and utterly alone. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it cautiously, revealing Josh. He looked as bad as she felt, unshaven, clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past her into the room. Laura sighed, closing the door. "What's left to say, Josh? We've lost everything." Josh turned to her, a desperate gleam in his eye. "Not everything. Not yet. We can still fight back." Laura laughed bitterly. "Fight back? Against what? The entire town hates us. Mark has taken everything. It's over." "No," Josh insisted, grabbing her shoulders. "We can't let him win like this. We need to confront him, expose what he's done." Laura shrugged off his hands, moving away. "And how exactly do you propose we do that? No one will listen to us." Josh's eyes narrowed. "We don't need them to listen. We just need to scare Mark enough that he backs off. Make him think we have something on him." Laura hesitated, considering. She had nothing left to lose, really, and the thought of wiping that smug look off Mark's face was tempting. "What did you have in mind?" she asked finally. Josh grinned, a shadow of his old charm returning. "We show up at his house unannounced. You try to appeal to his emotions, remind him of your history together, and I'll threaten legal action. Slander, defamation, the works." Laura nodded slowly. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." The next evening, they pulled up in front of Mark's new house. It was larger than the one he had shared with Laura, set back from the road with a manicured lawn. The sight of it made Laura's heart ache with loss and anger. They marched up to the front door, Laura's heart pounding in her chest. Josh knocked, his face set in determination. The door opened, revealing Mark. He looked at them with mild surprise, as if they were unexpected but not unwelcome dinner guests. "Well," he said, his voice cool, "this is a surprise. Please come in." Laura and Josh exchanged a glance, thrown off by Mark's calm demeanor. They followed him into a spacious living room, feeling increasingly out of place. What can I do for you? Mark asked, settling into an armchair and regarding them with polite interest. Laura stepped forward, her rehearsed speech dying on her lips. Instead, what came out was raw and emotional. Mark, please. This has gone too far. We had 15 years together. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Mark's expression didn't change. It meant everything to me, Laura. Right up until you threw it away for him. He nodded towards Josh, who bristled. Now listen here, Josh started, puffing up his chest. What you've done is illegal. Slander, defamation. We could sue you for everything you've got. To their shock, Mark laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound that sent chills down Laura's spine. Sue me? Mark repeated, standing up. With what lawyer? With what money? He turned to Josh. Did you know your lawyer works for me now? He was quite happy to hand over your case files when I made him a better offer. Josh's face paled. You can't do that, he whispered. Mark's smile was predatory. I already have, just like I've already spoken to your former employers at the clinic. Neither of you will work in this town again. In fact, he continued, moving to his desk and pulling out a file, you might have bigger problems to worry about soon. He handed Laura a document. As she read it, her legs gave out, and she sank onto the couch. Embezzlement, she gasped. But we never. The evidence says otherwise. Mark cut her off. It's amazing what a good forensic accountant can find when they know where to look. He turned back to Josh, holding out another paper. Oh, and Josh, this is for you. A foreclosure notice on your apartment. Turns out your wife was quite happy to sign over her rights when I explained the situation to her. Josh took the paper numbly, his earlier bravado completely deflated. Mark stood over them, his voice cold and final. You wanted a new life, he said to Laura. Now you've got it, just not the one you imagined. He moved to the door, opening it in a clear dismissal. I'd start packing if I were you. The authorities will be in touch soon about those embezzlement charges. As Laura and Josh stumbled out of the house, the full weight of their situation crashed down on them. They had come hoping to scare Mark, to regain some control over their lives. Instead, they had discovered just how thoroughly he had destroyed them. They stood on the sidewalk, staring at each other in shock and despair. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Mark's new neighborhood. It felt like a perfect metaphor for the darkness closing in around them. What do we do now? Laura whispered, her voice breaking. Josh shook his head, his eyes hollow. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know if there's anything we can do. As they walked away from Mark's house, Laura felt a sense of finality settling over her. This wasn't just the end of her marriage or her affair with Josh. It was the end of everything she had ever known or hoped for. And as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of her nightmare. Laura stared at the summons in her hand, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. Embezzlement charges. It was impossible. She had never stolen a dime in her life. But there it was, in black and white, ordering her to appear in court. Across the dingy motel room, Josh paced like a caged animal, his face a mask of fury and despair. This is bullshit, he shouted, kicking a chair. We didn't do anything wrong. Laura looked up at him, feeling a wave of revulsion. How had she ever found this man attractive? Now all she saw was a weak, pathetic shell of a human being. Except destroy our families and lose our jobs, she said bitterly. Josh whirled on her, eyes blazing. Don't you dare pin this on me. You're the one who got caught by your kid. If you'd been more careful. If I'd been more careful? Laura's voice rose to match his. You're the one who lied about being married. You ruined my life. They glared at each other. The passion that had once drawn them together now twisted into something ugly and poisonous. Laura felt sick to her stomach. How had it come to this? As the days passed, their situation grew increasingly desperate. The clinic, once their workplace and the scene of their illicit meetings, now turned against them completely. Former co-workers gave damning statements, painting Laura and Josh as manipulative thieves who had abused their positions for personal gain. Laura watched in horror as her life spiraled out of control. She tried to hire a lawyer, only to discover that her assets had been frozen. No one would take her case without payment up front, and she had nothing left to give. Josh's descent was even more rapid and brutal. The stress and shame of the situation took its toll, and he began drinking heavily. Their arguments, once merely heated, turned physical. Laura found herself flinching away from his touch, terrified of the rage she saw in his eyes. One night, after a particularly vicious fight that left Laura nursing a bruised cheek, she awoke to find Josh gone. His few possessions had vanished, along with what little cash they had left. He had abandoned her, just as she had abandoned her family. Alone in the decaying apartment, Laura felt the full weight of her isolation crash down upon her. With trembling fingers, she dialed her sister's number, praying for a lifeline. "Please," she sobbed when her sister answered. "I know I messed up, but I need help. I have nowhere else to go." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When her sister finally spoke, her voice was cold and distant. "You made your choices, Laura. Now you have to live with them. Don't call here again." The line went dead, leaving Laura curled on the floor, racked with sobs. She had lost everything: her home, her job, her family. And for what? A tawdry affair that had crumbled at the first sign of adversity. As the days blurred together, Laura found herself sinking deeper into despair. She barely ate, barely slept. The only thing that kept her going was a dim hope that somehow, someway, she might be able to salvage some small piece of her former life. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Early one morning, a sharp knock at the door jolted Laura from a fitful sleep. She opened it to find two stern-faced police officers standing in the hallway. "Laura Buford?" one of them asked, though it wasn't really a question. Laura nodded numbly, her heart pounding in her chest. "You're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The officer's words faded into a dull roar as Laura felt cold metal close around her wrists. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. As they led her out of the apartment building, Laura caught sight of something in her mailbox. A letter, crisp and official-looking, with a sinking feeling. She realized it was from Mark's lawyer. "Wait," she pleaded with the officers. "Please, can I just—" But they ignored her, guiding her firmly towards the waiting police car. As Laura was placed in the back seat, she caught one last glimpse of the letter. Even from a distance, she could make out the words that shattered what was left of her world. "Sole custody of Jacob has been awarded to Mark Buford." The car door slammed shut, and Laura felt the last threads of her old life snap. As they drove away, leaving behind the ruins of everything she had once held dear, Laura closed her eyes and surrendered to the darkness that had been threatening to consume her for so long. Miles away, in a neighborhood that could not have been more different from the rundown area where Laura had been arrested, Mark Buford stood in the driveway of his new home. He watched as Jacob tossed a basketball through a hoop mounted above the garage, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Nice shot, son," he called out as Jacob sank another basket. Jacob turned, grinning. "Thanks, Dad. Hey, want to play a quick game before dinner?" Mark checked his watch, then nodded. "Sure, why not? First to 10. As they played, Mark marveled at how quickly Jacob had adapted to their new life. The anger and hurt that had consumed the boy in the immediate aftermath of Laura's betrayal had gradually given way to a quiet resilience. Mark liked to think he had played a part in that transformation, teaching Jacob the importance of strength and self-reliance in the face of adversity. Later that evening, as they sat at the dinner table in their spacious new kitchen, Jacob looked up from his plate with a serious expression. "Dad," he began hesitantly, "I just wanted to say thanks for everything, for not letting Mom tear our family apart." Mark felt a surge of emotion, but he kept his face carefully neutral. You don't need to thank me, Jake. We're family. We stick together, no matter what. Jacob nodded, a look of admiration in his eyes that made Mark's chest swell with pride. This, he thought, made it all worthwhile. The pain, the betrayal, the ruthless steps he had taken to ensure Laura and her lover paid for their actions. It had all been for this moment, for the bond he now shared with his son. As Jacob cleared the table, Mark retreated to his study. He poured himself a glass of scotch and settled into the leather armchair behind his desk. The room was a testament to his success, dark with paneling, shelves lined with leather-bound books, framed diplomas and awards on the walls. But as Mark sipped his drink, he found his gaze drawn to a small, unopened envelope on the corner of the desk. Laura's handwriting, once so familiar, now seemed alien and threatening. He had received the letter that morning, forwarded by his lawyer. He knew what it contained without opening it. A plea to see Jacob, no doubt. A desperate attempt to claw back some small piece of the life she had so carelessly thrown away. For a moment, Mark's hand hovered over the envelope. A part of him, a part he thought long buried, whispered that perhaps he had gone too far, that the revenge he had exacted had crossed a line from justice into cruelty. But then he remembered the look on Jacob's face when the boy had caught Laura with Josh. He remembered the pain in his son's eyes, the betrayal that had aged him far beyond his years. And Mark's resolve hardened once more. With a decisive motion, he picked up the letter and dropped it into the wastebasket beside his desk. Then, striking a match, he set the paper alight. He watched as the flames consumed Laura's words, reducing them to ash. It was a fitting metaphor, he thought, for the final destruction of their shared past. As the last embers died away, Mark turned back to his desk. There was work to be done, a future to be built. He had protected his son, had ensured that Laura and Josh would never again be in a position to hurt them. Now it was time to move forward, to embrace the new life he had fought so hard to create. Outside the study window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Mark allowed himself a small smile. Tomorrow would be another day, another step further from the pain of the past and into the promise of the future. In a small, stark cell in the county jail, Laura sat on the edge of a narrow cot, her head in her hands. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in, leaving her numb with shock and despair. She thought back to that fateful day in the restaurant when Jacob had caught her with Josh. If she could go back, change that one moment, but no. It was pointless to dwell on what-ifs. The choices she had made, the path she had chosen, had led her inexorably to this cold, lonely place. As night fell and the jail grew quiet, Laura found herself haunted by memories of her old life. The sound of Jacob's laughter, the warmth of Mark's embrace, the simple joy of family dinners and lazy Sunday mornings. All of it gone now, destroyed by her own selfish desires. She thought of Josh, wondering where he was now. Had he managed to escape the consequences of their affair? Or was he, too, facing the harsh reality of their actions? Laura found she didn't much care either way. The passion that had once consumed her had burned away, leaving nothing but ashes and regret. As she lay on the uncomfortable cot, staring at the ceiling, Laura realized that this was her new reality. The life she had known was gone, as surely as if it had never existed. All that remained was the long, dark road ahead, a road paved with the consequences of her choices. Weeks turned into months, and Laura's case finally went to trial. She sat in the courtroom, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed woman she saw reflected in the polished surface of the defense table. Her court-appointed lawyer went through the motions, but they both knew it was hopeless. The evidence against her was overwhelming, thanks to Mark's meticulous planning. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Laura felt nothing. She had known this was coming from the moment the handcuffs had closed around her wrists. As the judge pronounced her sentence, 5 years in state prison, she caught a glimpse of Mark sitting in the back of the courtroom. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Laura saw no triumph in his gaze, no satisfaction, only a cold, implacable resolve. The years in prison passed in a gray blur. Laura went through the motions of daily life, meals, work assignments, occasional visits to the recreation yard. But she felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold. She received no visitors, no letters. Her family had washed their hands of her entirely. Sometimes, in the dark of night, she would allow herself to think of Jacob, wondering what kind of young man he was becoming. But those thoughts were too painful to dwell on for long. As her release date approached, Laura found herself filled with a mixture of anticipation and dread. What kind of life awaited her on the outside? She had lost everything: her home, her career, her family. She would be starting from less than nothing, with the stigma of her conviction hanging over her like a dark cloud. On the day of her release, Laura stood at the gates of the prison, a small bag containing her meager possessions clutched in her hand. She took a deep breath, trying to summon some feeling, any feeling, about her newfound freedom. But there was nothing, just a hollow emptiness where her heart used to be. As she stepped out onto the street, Laura realized that her punishment was far from over. The 5 years behind bars had been just the beginning. The real sentence, the loss of everything and everyone she had ever loved, would last a lifetime. Meanwhile, in a quiet, upscale neighborhood across town, Mark Buford sat on the porch of his home, watching the sun set. Beside him, Jacob, now a young man on the cusp of adulthood, lounged in a comfortable chair, idly flipping through a college brochure. "Have you decided where you're going to apply?" Mark asked, taking a sip of his iced tea. Jacob shrugged, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I'm leaning toward state. Their business program is supposed to be excellent." Mark nodded approvingly. "It is, and it's not too far from home." "That's good." They lapsed into a comfortable silence, enjoying the peacefulness of the evening. After a few minutes, Jacob spoke again, his voice hesitant. "Dad, do you ever think about Mom?" Mark tensed slightly, but kept his expression neutral. "Sometimes," he admitted. "It's hard not to, given everything that happened." Jacob nodded slowly. "I saw her name in the paper the other day. She's out of prison now." Mark said nothing, waiting for his son to continue. "Do you think—" Jacob paused, struggling to find the right words. "Do you think we did the right thing, cutting her off completely?" For a long moment, Mark was silent, considering his response carefully. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Jake, your mother made her choices. She was willing to throw away our family for a fling with another man. The consequences of those choices were hers to bear." He turned to look at his son, seeing the conflict in the young man's eyes. "I know it hasn't been easy, but look at where we are now. You're about to start college, to build a life for yourself. We've come through this stronger, haven't we?" Jacob nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess we have." Mark reached out, squeezing his son's shoulder. "The past is the past, Jake. We can't change it. All we can do is move forward and make the best of what we have now." As if on cue, the mail truck pulled up to their house. Jacob stood, stretching. "I'll get it," he said, jogging down to the mailbox. Mark watched him go, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They had weathered the storm together, he and Jacob. The bond between them was stronger than ever. Whatever doubts or regrets might linger, Mark knew he had done what was necessary to protect his son, to ensure that Laura's betrayal didn't destroy both their lives. Jacob returned, flipping through the stack of envelopes. Bills, ads, more college stuff. He muttered. Then he paused, holding up a plain white envelope. "This one's for you, Dad. No return address." Mark took the envelope, a feeling of unease settling in his stomach as he recognized the handwriting. Laura, even after all this time, she was still trying to insert herself back into their lives. "What is it?" Jacob asked, curiosity evident in his voice. Mark stood, tucking the unopened letter into his pocket. "Nothing important," he said firmly. "Just some old business. Nothing for you to worry about." As they went back into the house, Mark's mind was already made up. Later that night, when Jacob was asleep, he would burn the letter, just as he had burned all the others. Laura was part of their past, and that was where she would remain. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Mark stood in the kitchen, brewing a pot of coffee. When Jacob came downstairs, backpack slung over his shoulder. "Heading out?" Mark asked, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. Jacob nodded, accepting one of the mugs gratefully. "Yeah, meeting some friends to study for finals. I'll be back for dinner." As Jacob turned to leave, Mark felt a sudden surge of emotion. "Jake," he called out, causing his son to pause at the door. "I just want you to know, I'm proud of you, of the man you've become." Jacob smiled, a hint of the boy he had been shining through. "Thanks, Dad. I'm proud of us, too, for getting through everything." And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Mark moved to the window, watching as Jacob got into his car and drove away. He thought about the letter, now nothing but ashes in the fireplace, about Laura and Josh and all the pain and betrayal of the past. But as he sipped his coffee and watched the neighborhood come to life around him, Mark felt a sense of peace settle over him. The storm had passed. The revenge he had so meticulously planned and executed was complete. He and Jacob had survived, had thrived even, emerging stronger on the other side. Whatever the future might hold, whatever ghosts of the past might try to resurface, Mark knew that he and his son would face it together. They had weathered one storm. They could weather anything. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Mark turned away from the window. There was work to be done, a future to be built, and he was ready for whatever came next. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.